The late afternoon light was pouring through our living room windows, giving everything that warm, honey-colored glow I've always loved. I had just dropped my work bag by the door when Daniel walked in, loosening his tie and smiling like he couldn't wait to see me. Our 10-year anniversary trip was just days away, and the excitement between us felt almost tangible. We sat side by side at the coffee table, laptops open, bouncing ideas back and forth, sparkling beaches, intimate little restaurants tucked away on cobblestone streets, excursions that promised both adventure and romance. For a moment, it felt like we were completely in sync, like the last decade had been leading to this perfect celebration. Daniel's laugh was that easy, familiar sound I'd once fallen in love with. He teased me about overpacking. I teased him about how obsessive he was with our itinerary. It was comfortable, light, the kind of playful rhythm that made me believe, just for a moment, that maybe we still had it. When he stood up, saying he was going to jump in the shower, he left his laptop right there on the table, the screen casting a soft glow over our plans. I leaned back, running through my own mental checklist: passports, chargers, the dress I'd picked for our anniversary dinner. Then, like a sudden jolt, I remembered the email. That urgent client message I'd completely forgotten to send earlier. With Daniel in the shower and his laptop sitting right there, it just made sense to use it. I pulled the chair closer, my fingers brushing the keyboard, completely unaware that I was seconds away from uncovering something that would change everything. The screen was already awake, a faint hum from the laptop fan filling the quiet room. I clicked open the browser, my mind still halfway on the dinner recipe I was planning to try later. My only goal was to fire off that quick reply to my client and get back to the warm bubble of anniversary planning. But the moment the browser popped up, I noticed Daniel's Instagram tab glowing at the top, still open, still logged in. It wasn't something I'd ever gone snooping through before, and I wasn't looking for trouble now. But my eyes caught the preview of a message, and something in my gut tightened. Her name wasn't familiar, but the way she used an emoji in the snippet felt far too personal. My cursor hovered, my heart already thudding in my chest, even though I told myself I was being ridiculous. I shouldn't click. I knew I shouldn't. But curiosity mixed with a strange, uneasy dread, like sensing a storm before the first drop of rain. I tapped the tab. The chat window slid open instantly, her name pinned at the top like a trophy, and the last message staring back at me in bold letters. "I'll miss our little love-making breaks so much while you're gone." The words hit me like a physical blow. My breath stalled. The room seemed to shrink around me, the warm glow from the window now feeling cold and sharp. My hands stayed frozen on the trackpad, my mind scrambling for another explanation, any explanation that didn't confirm the sick heaviness pooling in my stomach. But deep down, before I even scrolled, I knew. My fingers moved almost on their own, scrolling through the thread as if I needed proof carved into my memory. There it was, weeks' worth of flirtatious, explicit exchanges, inside jokes, plans to meet during lunch breaks, pet names I'd never heard before. My heart pounded in my ears, each line of text pulling me deeper into a reality I didn't want to accept. The betrayal wasn't a single blow, it was a series of sharp, deliberate cuts, and with every message, I felt another piece of the life I thought I knew slip away. I could hear the faint rush of the shower upstairs, the sound of water hitting tile, oblivious to the storm raging in me. Part of me wanted to slam the laptop shut and scream until my throat burned. Another part wanted to keep reading, to gather every detail, every timestamp, every shred of evidence that would prove this wasn't just some harmless work flirtation. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice, made over and over again. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I closed the laptop quietly, my hands steady even though my chest felt like it was caving in. By the time Daniel came back down, towel around his shoulders, I was sitting on the couch with a smile that felt foreign on my face. I asked about dinner as if nothing had happened. Inside, though, a single clear thought had already taken root, one that would grow sharper with every passing hour. That night, long after Daniel had drifted off to sleep beside me, I lay staring at the ceiling, the faint tick of the clock matching the slow, deliberate rhythm of my thoughts. The image of that message replayed in my mind on a loop. Her words, the brazen intimacy of them, the way they didn't even bother to hide. I felt the burn of humiliation, but underneath it, something colder and far more dangerous was taking shape. This wasn't just about heartbreak. This was about power and how I was going to take mine back. I turned onto my side, watching the dim outline of his face in the glow from the street lamp outside. He looked peaceful, almost innocent, his breathing deep and even. I wondered if she'd sent him anything tonight, if he'd fallen asleep thinking of her instead of me. A part of me wanted to wake him, to force him to look me in the eyes and confess. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized an immediate confrontation would only give him the upper hand. He'd deny, deflect, spin it in his favor, and I wasn't going to give him that chance. So I stayed silent, my body still beside his, while my mind began laying out the blueprint of something far more satisfying than shouting matches or tearful ultimatums. If he thought this trip was going to be a celebration of us, he was in for the shock of his life. The next morning, over coffee, I watched him scroll through his phone, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. I wondered if it was her. I wondered if he even realized how transparent he was. Every little gesture, tilting the screen away from me, setting the phone face down on the table, only confirmed what I already knew. And yet, I smiled, asked about his meetings, even reached over to straighten his collar before he left for work. I wasn't the wounded wife. Not yet. I was the calm before the storm. When he was gone, I opened my own laptop and began gathering the kind of information that would make his lies impossible to bury. Screenshots of the messages, every time-stamped photo they'd sent each other, every suggestive comment she'd left on his posts. The more I collected, the steadier my hands became. This wasn't just about catching him. It was about making sure the truth would burn through every corner of his life, leaving nowhere for him to hide. By the time Daniel came home that evening, I had an entire folder neatly organized, labeled innocuously so he'd never suspect a thing. I greeted him with a kiss, listened to him talk about his day, and nodded along as he mentioned how much he was looking forward to getting away from it all on our anniversary trip. Little did he know, that trip was about to become something he'd never forget, for all the wrong reasons. That night, I pretended to be tired early, slipping into bed before him. In reality, I was listening to the faint clicks of his keyboard in the other room, the low hum of his voice when he thought I was asleep. I couldn't make out every word, but the tone was unmistakable. That quiet, intimate register you reserve for someone who isn't supposed to hear it. My pulse stayed steady. The old me might have stormed out, demanded answers, begged for the truth, but that woman was gone. Instead, I lay there in the dark, feeling the weight of my own patience. Every second I stayed silent was another inch of ground I gained. I was letting him dig his own grave, one careless message, one smug smile at a time. By the time he finally slipped into bed, whispering a casual goodnight, like nothing was wrong, I had already decided exactly how and when this would end. And it wouldn't be with me crying in our kitchen. No, it would be on his precious anniversary trip, the one he thought would be the highlight of our marriage. He just didn't know I was going to make sure it was the beginning of his undoing. A few days before the trip, I set the first piece of my plan in motion. Over breakfast, I sighed dramatically and told Daniel I'd just gotten an email from one of my biggest clients, an urgent meeting I couldn't possibly miss. I made it sound inconvenient, like I was torn about letting him go alone for a day, but determined to catch the next flight and meet him at the hotel. He barely hesitated before reassuring me it was fine, that he'd hold down the fort until I arrived. His smile was almost too easy, too eager. It was confirmation enough that a solo day was exactly what he wanted. I kissed him before he left for work, lingering just long enough to hide the flicker of satisfaction on my face. The truth was, every word I'd told him was a lie. There was no meeting, no client emergency. That day was going to be his undoing, and I needed him far enough away, and unsuspecting, for everything to unfold perfectly. The trick was to make him believe I was still playing the role of the devoted wife, even as I was dismantling that illusion piece by piece. That night, as we packed side by side, he hummed under his breath, completely oblivious to the fact that the woman folding clothes next to him was already holding the matches, ready to set fire to the life they'd built together. and all he had to do was board that plane. The morning he left, I played my part flawlessly. I drove him to the airport, kissed him at the drop-off like any loving wife would, and waved until he disappeared through the sliding doors. The moment he was out of sight, I pulled over, took a deep breath, and shifted gears, literally and figuratively. This wasn't a day for sadness. It was the day I finally took control. First stop, the bank. I walked in with every necessary document, my voice calm but firm as I transferred every cent from our joint account into my personal one. The teller didn't know she was helping me drain the last of his safety net. Then, back home, I opened my laptop and began compiling the full digital trail of his infidelity. Screenshots, timestamps, saved images, every damning detail neatly organized into a report. The kind that would leave no room for doubt, no possibility for him to twist the truth. Once the evidence was airtight, I drafted an anonymous, highly detailed complaint to his company's HR department. No embellishments, no emotion, just the facts, the kind of facts that could derail a career. I hit send without hesitation, imagining the chain reaction that would follow. By the time Daniel's flight was somewhere over the ocean, my house was quiet, my list complete. I poured myself a glass of wine, not to celebrate yet, but to steady the hum of adrenaline running through me. This wasn't just about catching him. It was about precision, about making every consequence land exactly where it would hurt the most. I didn't want a messy explosion. I wanted a clean detonation, timed perfectly so there'd be no escape. I booked a spa appointment for the next morning, not because I needed it, but because I wanted the contrast. While his dream trip began to unravel, I'd be somewhere peaceful, surrounded by calm. Let him sweat, let him panic. I'd spent too many years picking up the pieces after his mistakes. This time I'd be the one holding the pieces, deciding which ones to crush. Before bed, I checked my email one last time. The HR department had already replied to my anonymous report, thanking me for the detailed and concerning information, and confirming they'd take immediate action. I closed my laptop with a sense of finality. Phase 1 was complete. Phase 2, well, that would be playing out thousands of miles away by sunrise. The first call came before noon. His name lit up my phone, and I let it ring until it stopped. Then came the text. "Hey, weird thing. My card isn't working. Can you check with the bank?" I could almost hear the forced casualness in his tone, the way he was trying not to sound panicked. I set the phone down without replying and took another slow sip of my coffee. He had no idea that every one of his cards was now just a useless piece of plastic. By mid-afternoon, the messages had shifted. Shorter, sharper, the kind you send when you're starting to lose control. "The hotel is saying they'll kick me out if I don't pay another way. Call me." I didn't. I was in the middle of my spa appointment by then, wrapped in a robe, the scent of eucalyptus in the air while his perfect vacation was collapsing in real time. Somewhere between my facial and the herbal tea they handed me afterward, I checked my phone again. 6 missed calls, 2 voicemails I had no intention of listening to. If he thought this was bad, he didn't know the half of it yet. Because while he was fumbling for a way to pay for his room, another kind of storm was already closing in on him from back home. Later that evening, I pictured him pacing the tiled floor of that luxury resort room, his temper just barely contained as the front desk staff reminded him, again, that without a valid payment, he'd be asked to leave. Meanwhile, across the city, his company's HR department was already in motion. My anonymous report had landed exactly where it needed to, and by the time their urgent investigation email hit his inbox, both he and his little office fling were halfway through their first cocktails. I could imagine the scene, the two of them huddled over his phone, the sudden shift in their expressions when they read the subject line. Request for immediate compliance. Workplace conduct inquiry. It was the kind of email you don't come back from unscathed. Every word in that report was factual, documented, impossible to dispute. I had made sure of it. By the time he tried calling me again, it wasn't about the money anymore. His voice, in the short voicemail he left, was different, quieter, edged with something I recognized instantly: fear. And that, more than anything, told me the trap was working exactly as I'd planned. I didn't need to see his face to know the exact look he was wearing. The tight jaw, the quick dart of his eyes, the way he'd press his lips together when he realized he'd been cornered. While he was trying to juggle a furious hotel manager and the sudden implosion of his career, I was sitting in my living room, candle lit, glass of wine in hand, feeling the kind of calm I hadn't felt in years. It was almost poetic. The more chaos raged in his world, the more still mine became. I pictured him explaining to the resort staff that there'd been some kind of banking mistake, while his phone kept buzzing with HR follow-up requests, each one demanding immediate answers. The woman he'd been so eager to spend his lunch breaks with was probably now realizing her own position was in just as much jeopardy as his. That thought alone was worth savoring. When I finally turned my phone face down and set it aside for the night, I knew I didn't need to interfere anymore. The dominoes were falling on their own, each one hitting exactly where I'd aimed. And the best part? The real ending hadn't even happened yet. That was waiting for him the moment he came home. The morning he was due back, I woke up before sunrise, the house still and quiet. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and drafted the final piece of my plan, a social media post that would look, to the outside world, like a celebration, but to him, would read like a victory lap. I chose my words carefully, balancing honesty with just enough ambiguity to make people lean in. 10 years of marriage, and today I'm celebrating freedom. I added a photo of me on the patio with a champagne glass in hand, the city skyline behind me. It was simple, elegant, devastating. Within minutes of posting, the messages started pouring in, friends, family, even acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years, all asking what had happened. Some were concerned, others nosy, a few outright cheering me on. I didn't answer any of them, not yet. I wanted the speculation to build, for the truth to ripple through our circles on its own. Word travels fast when scandal is involved, and Daniel's, well, his had all the right ingredients. By the time I checked my phone an hour later, one of his coworkers had already liked the post. I smiled into my coffee. The story was spreading, threading itself through both our personal and professional worlds, and I hadn't even said his name. When Daniel finally walked through the front door that evening, he didn't look like the man who'd left a week ago. His tan was uneven, his hair unkempt, and the usual cocky confidence in his stride was nowhere to be found. He set his suitcase down like it weighed 100 pounds and just stood there, staring at me. I didn't rush to fill the silence. I simply sipped my champagne, letting the quiet stretch until it felt almost unbearable. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand, not in anger, but in dismissal. "You don't need to explain," I said evenly. "Everyone already knows." His eyes flickered, that small, telling flinch when someone realizes the damage is already done. I could practically see the thoughts racing through his head, HR, the rumors, the colleagues who'd never look at him the same way again. "I hope the trip was worth it," I added, my tone light, almost casual. That was the dagger. Not the shouting, not the accusations, just the knowledge that I had walked away from this with my dignity intact, while he'd returned with nothing but the mess he'd made. He didn't answer me. He couldn't. Instead, he dropped into the nearest chair, his shoulders slumped, staring at the floor like it might offer him some kind of escape. I let the silence hang, taking my time with another sip of champagne. Outside, the city moved on as if nothing monumental had just happened in our living room. Inside, I knew I had reached the final page of this chapter in my life. I stood, walked over to the counter, and picked up my phone. With a deliberate swipe, I opened the camera and snapped a photo. Me, smiling faintly with my glass raised, Daniel's figure blurred in the background. I posted it without a caption this time. No words needed. Anyone who saw it would understand exactly who had won. As I turned back toward him, I felt lighter, as if I'd shed years of carrying his weight. "That trip," I said quietly, almost to myself, "was the best one I never took." His head lifted slightly, but there was no fire left in his eyes, only the hollow realization that I'd beaten him at his own game, and I hadn't even broken a sweat.